Hi, it's Ken. That's that Bambi deer I tried to save from its mother that got hit by a car in front of me. I snatched that deer out of its mama. Uh, I wiped the slime from it, tried to breathe into it, give it little chest compressions, but it didn't work out too good. So that's literally on the day that deer was being born. As you can see, that raccoon next to it, that was also hit by a car. I just like to mount. If I did it, then I like to go and mount it. Anyway, I didn't hit the mama, but I was right there when it happened. So anyway, I come on this today just for one specific reason, and it's something that, quite frankly, they may cut me off before I get finished because it goes against, well, I don't even want to say it because it'll give them a heads up about what it is that I want to talk about. And what it is I want to talk about is really, really, really important to future generations. There's a lot of generations coming up that have no idea at all about what it is that I'm about to talk about. And the reason they don't is because, quite frankly, it's been very well hidden from them for a long, long time. They don't know about it because it's been something that quite frankly, the people that control the oil production of the world don't want people to know about, basically. In 1938, as we were going into a buildup of World War II, our American military was trying to make a deal with the oil conglomerates of the day. One of the things that the main thing I think that the oil conglomerates came up with as a contingency of that deal was that they wanted to make the hemp plant illegal. Now, before you get excited about hemp, which is marijuana, I want you to know that I'm not talking about marijuana to be used for medicinal purposes or to be used to get high. I'm talking about hemp that if it is cross-pollinated, in other words, if they let the male plant germinate the seed or germinate the female plant, which the THC is what makes the seed of the female plant. So when you're talking about letting the male plants flourish along with the female plants, what happens is the female plants produce a huge amount of seed. And they can even be bioengineered to the point where they have no THC whatsoever. So the psychotropic drug that gets people high would not be involved at all with the production of the seed oil of the hemp plant. People are going to think this is crazy, but in the Bible it says that, young men get dreams young men get visions and old men get dreams. I get dreams at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I wake up and I'm like wide awake and I have to write it down. One of my dreams that I got was for the gunshot detectors that currently exist to be used in schools that would be in safe rooms that have bulletproof sheetrock and bulletproof glass on the door, and maybe a slide on the door where the teacher can open it up and use that to, use a weapon out through it, or to throw flashbangs out underneath somebody's feet that's trying to commit harm to our children. Meanwhile, of course, with bulletproof glass, you can see the students that are, that are real students that aren't holding a weapon, that are trying to come into the room, and she can open up the door and let them in. Governor Kemp of Georgia has a pilot program, and the teachers have a button on their tag, that their identification tag, And they don't just have a button. They have a button that, depending on how many times they push that button, it tells them uh, exactly what's going on. In other words, if, say, one teacher in room 331 has a student that goes down into convulsions, when she measures that tag as a medical emergency, it tells them exactly that it's room 331. It tells them exactly that it's a medical emergency, and for that reason they can lock the school down. They can do whatever they got to do to try to make things safer for the students. My invention was safes that are hidden inside of cabinets within teachers' rooms that are trained and certified with weaponry. Would actually work very well with Governor Kemp's pilot program that he has for safety schools. And the weapons that the teachers cannot get to unless the active shooter alarm goes off. They can't be fooled by firecrackers. They can't be fooled by any kind of banging noises or cars backfiring or whatever. It literally reads the audio signature of a gunshot, and it will not go off unless that audio signature has indicated. And of course, with Brian Kemp's concept for safety school systems, they already have like an extra button they can push in case there's a school shooter. But this would be like the first time the gunshot goes off, it automatically says school shooter. And the reason I think this is important is because hidden inside the cabinetry of the certified trained teachers, there could be a safe. Now that safe is something that normally the teacher would not be able to open. And in fact, the only way she could open that safe is if the security system told her there was an active shooter in the school, in which case she would know to open up the safe, put on her bulletproof vest that's clearly marked emergency responder, get out her weaponry, maybe some shotguns that shoot beanbags at people, and some flashbangs that throw out rubber bullets, kind of the same kind of defense system, maybe even built into the outside of the rooms, so that if the shooter gets that close to the room, then they have the defense systems that are kind of set up like at the embassy, where the rubber bullets go out and disperse the problems within the embassies. This is something that, hey, if we can do this for the embassies of the United States, we certainly, under a larger scale, could do this for our students that are in our schools. And what's beautiful about this concept is it totally alleviates the parents' concerns about teachers having day-to-day access to guns. People would say, well, what are those concerns? One is they're worried about a student maybe taking a gun from a teacher. The other is they're concerned about a teacher having a bad day and going crazy with a gun. Now, of course, with the type of systems they're setting up now for people that walk into the school, you can't just walk into a school with a gun because the metal detector will set it off. So these weapons would be inside safes, and they would be secured. And the only way that safe can be opened is if there was a gunshot detected by the gunshot detectors that currently exist or are used in the big cities. This would have been a great thing for Brian Kemp to incorporate into his pilot program for safety school systems. I want to go real quick to make a point to people. We all know that Einstein was brilliant, and he was brilliant way before his time. He came up with E equals mc squared, which is energy equals matter times the speed of light squared, which is the physical dictation of the world, or the universe, if you will. Einstein said, raise new questions and explore new possibilities. He said, regard old problems from a new angle. I believe this is what my concept does. The dream that I had, uh, and if you look around this room, you'll see antlers and some mounted deer and some skull mounts. Check out that hog. Anyway, you'll see things around this room that tell you that I spent a lot of time in God's creation, which is to say I spent a lot of time in the woods. And I'm not the kind of person that was conventionally educated. However, my father was an engineer and my mother was a school teacher, and so I got educated as a very young child, often to my own detriment, because I figured out at a very young age, because I have that critical logical thinking ability, I can ace a Mensa test, which is, if you don't know what that is, then you can look it up and find out what that means. But I'm very good at that sort of thing. And it kind of gives me a concept of, Einstein and where he was coming from and what he was capable of, and et cetera, et cetera. And I'll give you an example. Einstein was considered socially inept because of one dinner party. At that dinner party, there was a gracious hostess, I'm sure, and there were some, uppity people, the intellectuals of the world, college intellectuals. And they were going around the dinner table and they were asking the men what they liked in a woman. And of course, one guy said, well, I like women that have legs that go all the way up to her. I'm a leg man. I like that. And then there might have been another guy that said, I like women with cleavage. That's just my thing, And then there might have been a guy that said, well, I like women who intellectually challenge me, where I can have a conversation and I don't feel like it's just one-sided because they don't understand anything I'm saying. That would have been me. And then it came to Einstein, and Einstein said something that was shocking, and it made him considered socially inept for the rest of his life. What Einstein said was, give me a smelly woman. Now, I don't know the rest of this, but I can guess. A gracious hostess was shocked. The people at the table were shocked. And so the gracious hostess quickly changed the subject so that it would spare Einstein further embarrassment, like you needed to spare Einstein from embarrassment. But what happened was there should have been a follow-up question that never got asked. That's just my opinion, and I'm pretty sure I'm probably right about that, just because I'm good at, if all the arrows point to the X, I'm good at finding the X. It's just one of them things that I'm good at. What happened was in the 30s, when this took place, indoor plumbing was brand new. And I'll give you an example of that. The Carnegies, who lived on Cumberland Island, had a working plantation on that island because they were the steel cut tycoons of the day. I've been there, and I've been in the dungeon home, whatever they want to call it. I forget the actual name of it. I've seen their indoor pool inside that home way back in the 20s. And I saw the way they did the plumbing. And back then, they didn't hide the plumbing in the wall. They put it on the outside of the wall to show it off, because indoor plumbing meant prestige. Well, Einstein was simply referring to the fact that by using indoor plumbing, man uses 27 times more water than he would even if he had a pump right there in his front yard, and he had to pump up the pails full of water and set them on the stove and heat them up and pour them into a bathtub and that sort of thing. And so what Einstein was saying is the same thing I'm going to say to you today. Stick to the million years of evolution. You can't go wrong. For millions of years, of evolution, this planet has survived. And then all of a sudden we come along and we're changing all kinds of things. Simply our overpopulation coupled with that water, that 27 times more water. Einstein, see, his mind clicked that way. He could see the future outcome of that without even somebody having to say, oh, population is going to triple or quadruple or whatever. He already knew those facts. Just like I know the facts that Midwestern region of our country was tapped into in 1948. We call it the breadbasket. When you fly over it, if you're going from the Appalachians to the Rocky Mountains, you'll see all the little green circles. That's where they're using that irrigated water from that aquifer to grow crops. Well, even 10 years ago, they said that was 80% depleted because of the ground penetrating radar. In other words, there aren't enough underground springs and what have you going into that to sustain it. So eventually that breadbasket is going to dry up. That's not very good news when it comes to feeding the world, especially when population in the next 20 years might double, So that's just one of those small facts that people like me pick up on and retain. And I've read every National Geographic there was to read until the Murdoch brothers get a hold of it. And then they've got stuff like a polar bear chasing a mountain lion off of a cliff. But they don't show the polar bear. They say the mountain lion jumped off the cliff because of global warming. I mean, this is the kind of idiocy that is feeding the idiocy that's going on with our whole country going left wing right now. Nothing has brought people out of poverty the way capitalism has. And that's worldwide. We've spread our wealth around the world worldwide. We're reining that in right now because we know we can do more good if we rein it in and build up our wealth, and then we can do more good in the future. But let me tell you something. Communism isn't it. Communism doesn't do anything but steal what other people have earned or provided. And so that's not the answer. There's other things that I could talk about. The 1-2-3 campaign, which was to get oligarchs' money completely and utterly out of the political process. In order to do that, we would have to, for one, no slush funds, no super PACs, no campaign contributions, no foundations that don't go 100% to the charity. I would say 15% to administration, just to make it fair. But if we don't do these things, and I'm talking under penalty of death, and yes, I realize the consequences of what I just said, but I also know that those are the consequences that are necessary for those greedy people to adhere to it. So, no campaign contributions, no slush funds, no super PACs, no foundations that don't go where they're supposed to go. Basically getting the oligarchs' money completely out of the political process. And now it comes to a position where people would say, well, how do you do that? Well, I have an answer for that. We have secure banking, and there's no reason whatsoever why we can't have secure voting. In other words, you can vote, use your Social Security number to vote, and then you can turn around and call back in and check on your vote. Not only check on your vote, but check on the overall balance of vote, so that each and every American is what we would call a voter's watchdog, looking for anomalies. And that would solve a lot of the problems within the voting systems that we have now. We're already taking in these computerized voting systems that they've openly said could be flipped, and yet our secure banking cannot be flipped like that. Yes, people can get into your account and do things with it. That's been happening, and it happens. And then you can go in and you can address that issue and straighten your account out and so on and so forth. Computer power triples every year in its ability. So and we haven't even touched into quantum computers yet. Not really. But AI and all that stuff is coming, and that's not necessarily a good thing in my opinion. But that's on its way. So there's a lot of things in our future that are kind of scary, but if somehow we can get a handle on regulating those things, they might not be that bad. Just saying. Now, what my concept is, and this is gonna really make the oil mongers mad. And the oil mongers in the military industrial complex are like this. They work together. They do things together. One hand washes the other, so to speak. My concept is, it's really quite simple. We have floating desalination factories that capture the ocean's energy. They're dome shaped so that if a wave comes up and hits onto it, it rolls back down. It goes through a graded walkway that goes around. They're circular in nature. And it goes around that circle. It goes through pinwheel generators that generate the electricity for the desalination process. And underneath those same platforms, there's also pinwheel generators that capture the ebb and flow of the tides, which is to say they're utilizing the ocean's energy in order to create desalinated water, which is clear, clean water. Now, they can be detached. There's like a fireman's hose, only it's really big. And they can detach that fireman's hose and cap it. And it's anchored to the center, so they can pull the anchor up and they can move that desalination factory the same way they do with an oil derrick today. They can get it out of harm's way if they know there's a horrible storm coming. They can move it to another location where it's needed because of different climates at different seasons and what have you. They can use it for repairs. They could take it to the shipyard where they're all made to be identical and interchangeable. And that's the best way to use the ocean's energy, is to make clean water. Now I'm going to explain to you how this went in my dream. I went down, I talked to the guy that was on the desalination factory. I was wondering, what is this? And he was telling me how it was virtually unsinkable. And it had this dome cover that, if it did get flipped over, it just came right back onto its, the way it's supposed to sit in the water. And he was talking about how if he got caught onto it during one of those bad storms, and he had to hook in a harness or something to keep himself from flopping around on the inside of this desalination factory. Anyway, that all aside, he says, are you really curious about, where this clean water goes and what it does? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, just follow that fireman's hose. Of course, in a dream, you can fly. In a God-given dream, you get everything in Technicolor. I know I hear people say, oh, I only dream in black and white. I dream in Technicolor when it comes to a God-given dream. Well, you can tell when your brain's just running case scenarios to solve problems that might come up in your life, and when God has given you a dream. There's a big difference, and believe me, when God gives you a dream, you'll know it. Anyway, I was able to kind of like fly along the, they had the posts that say underground line, and I flew along those posts for thousands of miles. It was a long way. And I came to a desert community that was first thing I ran into was in-ground homes before I could even far enough off where I couldn't even see the green fields that were growing out there. But there were these in-ground homes that were made, and a guy stepped out on his porch and he says to me, he says, you're Kenny, right? And I said, yeah. He said, I've been expecting you. And I was kind of like, that's weird, you know. He says, come on in, I'll show you. And so I went into his in-ground home, and he was showing me the walls that were made from the fiber of the hemp plant that was the building material they used along with concrete and what have you to make the in-ground home. And then he showed me it was like a radiator in front of a fan. And he told me that the thermostat on the wall controlled the valve of the water that goes to the radiator. So what he was saying was that the induction cooling of the home came from the pre-irrigated water that was used to irrigate the plants that were being grown in the desert. And so I got my fill of him, and I decided I wanted to go see hey, you want to go see the plants? Well, just follow the line. You'll get there. And so I went behind all of these in-ground homes. They were more like just slabs of concrete in the desert that had an open front on one side, which wasn't facing south, by the way. And inside his home, he had like a big flat screen TV that, he could switch the view from whatever he wanted to switch it to. It was really quite interesting. But it was very homey, very comfortable. It didn't seem like you were down in the ground. It seemed very much like you were just at home. I mean, it was just the way it was. So anyway, I went along those in-ground homes on the back sides of them, where the line was, and I came to what was a huge, I'm talking about greenery as far as you could see in every direction. Nothing but greenery. And off in the distance, I could see a plant that was like a coal burning facility, but wasn't. And I looked at it and I thought, well, that's peculiar. It looks kind of like a coal burning facility. There's a little bit of smoke coming out of the top of it. And so I was curious about that, what it was, what have you. But one of the farmers came up to me and he says, so what do you think? I've been expecting you, and you're here to see the plants, right? And I said, yeah, I'm here to see the plants. He says, no, you're not. He said, you're here to see God's solar panel. And I was, what are you talking about? And he said, you'll see. And what they were doing was they were de-seeding the full-grown plants. They had turbine harvesters. They de-seeded the plant. The seeds went into a bulk truck, and they defoliated the plants, and the foliation went into another another truck. Meanwhile, what came out was the stalk of the plant. That stalk, some of it was shipped off to the place right there that they made building material out of. Even clothing. They were making clothing out of the same fibrous stalk. And then as I continued on, I went to the factory that was burning the stalk for electricity. And I was thinking, how is that helping carbon? That was my first thought, was